I'll be right back, Andrew. I gotta make a phone call.
Okay. Okay, it looks like we're live and recording. I'm gonna text Todd again. Well,
Todd's typically on the road when he calls in, isn't he, Andrew?
yes. I had to resend him the link. I think he's trying to access it from somewhere. Oh, there he is. Can you hear us, Todd?
I can hear you.
All right. Well, we're all here.
Good afternoon, Greg.
Good afternoon, Mayor.
Hey,
And all.
appreciate everybody taking a minute on a Friday afternoon to get together this way. I've been able to briefly just mention to both Greg and Todd that we as staff have been wanting to get them together because we just been working on some stuff and thought it was time to bring them up to date. Basically, what I think we need to go over today, Greg and Todd, is we had been thinking we were focused on sending out a request for proposals that would just seek contract recycling with a private vendor. So our citizens could have a contract with a private vendor to do curbside recycling, and we would still maintain our Georgetown pickup on regular sanitation. We always thought that we would, one day when the lines crossed and it failed to pay for itself anymore, we'd consider privatizing the entire thing. There have been a whole series of events take place in the last 6 months to a month that have changed a lot of this calculus and the way we've approached this. We now think it may be time, because of these newer developments, to go ahead and have the option that we started off with. But we wanted to let you know that we think we're focusing more tightly now on the prospect of seeing what privatizing our entire operation would look like. And some of the things that have changed, of course, we keep reading the headlines about the landfill, and it's either going to be closed now or in October. And we need to find a different place. Andrew, I'll let you walk through some of the issues that you've discussed with me. But Devin has also worked closely with the vendors since we didn't get a bid on our first RFP. So we've been in pretty close contact with them all the way through this, and thought it was time, before we went any further with any public request for proposals, that we made sure you all were up to speed on the information and were in agreement with these type of RFPs. To that end, Robert had requested a little over $500,000 in this year's budget, the upcoming budget that we're working on now, for garbage trucks. And we took those out and asked if we could delay those until we complete these discussions and whatever the RFPs might look like. So we've delayed those, and but it was time to meet with you all. Is that fairly framed, Andrew?
Yes. Yes, it is. I like I said, I've got some more specifics we can dive into, but you just steer the conversation. When it's time for me to give it to you, I will.
Okay. And Devin, I know you've had the RFP ready. And actually, I think we've had some preliminary conversations with vendors to where we feel like that these bids are going to come in, if we do this, in a range that is acceptable, close to what we are now.
Right, and I think Mayor Andrew specifically has spoken with a vendor to date, and I think our intention is once we have this final document that we'll share that with vendors for comment. That's pretty standard practice in a bid like this, and that'll give us the opportunity to make any changes that would, potentially impact price. There are a lot of factors that will impact the price that we see on these proposals, and I think we need to set ourselves up to advertise the most complete and advantageous document we can. It's got to be advantageous to the vendors, and it's got to minimize their upfront costs, and that will in turn minimize costs for residents and consumers. So that document is, I would say, 95% complete. Have a couple outstanding comments that we're really going to need feedback from those vendors on. But aside from that, we're pretty pleased with the RFP and think that it's going to be a really positive way to get the information we need to make the decision on privatizing or bidding out tipping fees, which Andrew can speak more to that. He's gained some information that, like I said, with his conversations over the last week, that lead us to believe that privatizing might really be the best option for the city and its residents.
We also expect, or it's our intentions that if we get bids that are attractive enough that we go in this direction, that no employee is going to lose their job. We think we've talked with one vendor, and Adam Rumpke has said point blank he hopes that our employees will come to work for him. Those who don't, we intend to move into public works. So we may have a little juggling there to do if folks are equipment operators or have CDL licenses and things of that nature, but those will be little management issues that we'll take care of. But I've assured Robert that no one's going to lose their job in this exercise. Todd, it's something we've talked about for a little while, but it just seems to be really coming of age. Andrew did some work on, y'all have heard me say several times that I think the market, when we get to this point, that I think the market will take care of us. And we had talked to vendors enough, along with Judge Covington, in their work over the last year and a half, to where I had become confident that the players in the market would take care of us price-wise, that we weren't going to get terribly abused in the process. But if we choose to stay in the business of our own collection, Andrew's done some work on what tipping fees will be if we go to other facilities. Since our landfill has to close, and we've been receiving a subsidized tipping fee since we sold them the landfill. We had a subsidized tipping fee. Right now is around, I think, just under $18 a ton.
$18.37.
Okay, and we learned that if we end up going to a transfer station facility, the tipping fees are going to be in the $50 range. If we do the transportation to a landfill like Frankfurt or something, those tipping fees, what'd you learn, Andrew?
$30.
$30. So we'll do the analysis with you all, but we're afraid that if we continue our collection cost and add the new tipping fees, the ultimate cost to our citizens might really go up. Whereas if we privatize it, we have an opportunity to keep it stable and lower. And we can, the council members can talk about whether or not you want an RFP that requires recycling participation or one that makes recycling participation voluntary for the citizen. I think that's one of the questions that we need to discuss too. Is that not right, Devin?
That's right. And we think that it probably would be a worthwhile exercise to include that as an alternate. So provide us your price for optional recycling and provide us your price for mandatory recycling. And then we can determine if there's an appetite to make that mandatory. But, you know, that was one of the really positive nuggets that Andrew gleaned off his recent conversations. And I think that's a fantastic idea. There's no reason not to use this RFP to know the cost of every scenario. So that's most certainly going to be included in the RFP. The one other thing that I know that we wanted to discuss, and I don't know if it's a council question or a committee question, but Andrew, I know we were going to talk about the play of a franchise fee and what that looks like.
Yeah, I mean, it's part of every franchise discussion. Are you going to have it, and how much is it going to be? And I don't want to get too far ahead. I think I'd like to start at the beginning. The mayor kind of stole my thunder a little bit, but I'm gonna back up and I'm gonna go just talk. As the mayor said, we're under sort of an artificially deflated tipping fee, $16.37 a ton, and we have that because we have a long-standing contract with our landfill host. And as the mayor said, the landfill is scheduled to close. They're in litigation over it. They're, you know, it's a drawn-out battle. It's going to be ugly. But the bottom line is, even if that landfill stays there, our contract keeping that tipping fee artificially reduced ends December 31st of this year. And we are assuming that since the state has said you're going to shut down, that we won't have the ability to tip at that landfill after October. So we will have to go somewhere else. And the only other landfills that are in the vicinity are Frankfort, Mount Sterling, Boone County, and the mayor said there's one in Lincoln County. I mean, in terms of relative distances, Lincoln County is probably about as far away as Boone County is. So I don't know how much we want to drive our garbage anywhere other than, say, Frankfort. Our understanding of the tipping fee at Frankfort, although we haven't spoken directly to the owner, is $30. So that is almost double. But we're also in a little less than 2 or 3 weeks, I think, the transfer station here in Georgetown will open, and it's right next door to Public Works. So it'll be quite convenient in terms of saving on fuel. But as the mayor said in my conversation with the owner of that transfer station, he said the going rate is $50 a ton. And he said there's some wiggle room there, of course, but it's not going to be $16 a ton. It's going to be, you know, if we gave him a bulk guaranteed amount, maybe it's 48 or something like that. But I actually took the time and I did a little bit of analysis, and this is preliminary, of course, and these are just, we're making assumptions on these numbers, but I think they're market. But if we were to tip at the transfer station with the current waste that we're tipping, and assuming we're going to save a modest amount on fuel, let's say we save 1/3 on our fuel costs, our sanitation is going from having a surplus of $100,000, which in turn goes to subsidize the recycling center. It's going from having that $100,000 surplus to having an $850,000 deficit, just basically based on those tipping fees and the increases in salary. So the tipping fees is the vast majority of that change. So suddenly the math is a whole lot harder. I haven't done the math on tipping at Frankfurt because I don't know really how to calculate those fuel costs and the wear and tear costs and any other costs that we have, but they would be less, I think, overall than tipping here at the transfer station. But the idea of not tipping at a transfer station here in Georgetown just kind of strikes me as counterintuitive. But these are all analyses that we'll have to do. I think what I'm trying to get across is that whereas before we thought, let's see if we can make our sanitation better by seeing if we can supplement it with private recycling, it's now the way the winds are shifting. It's now seems like staying in the municipal sanitation business is looking harder and harder. When I spoke with Adam Rumpke, you all know that we are at a rate for residential garbage pickup of $15 a month with a reduced rate for folks 65 and older. When I spoke with Adam, he basically volunteered and gave me comparative data from some of the contracts that they have, some of the contracts that his competitors have in the area. And they vary based on different service levels and different service requirements. But the one they just signed on to in the past few months is in Montgomery County. And there they have 5,000 units for collection. They have mandatory weekly trash and mandatory weekly recycling. And they're paying a monthly rate of $15.25, which is a quarter higher than what ours is with recycling. And he gave me some other jurisdictions data, and I think there was in Erlanger, they pay $14 a month for trash, and then they pay $5 a month for optional recycling. So you're looking at lower trash costs, but because recycling is optional, they have somebody who got both would pay $19. And he said that the typical rate is going to be that it's going to be around $13 to $15 for trash, and another $5 to $10 for recycling, depending on how often and the type of container and how strict you are on the rules. And what he did was he went over all of the factors that we should consider in what shapes the cost, what shapes the price that we can offer. And these are all things that Devin and I have sort of considered in our RFP. Some of the things we get to bid in the alternative, so we know what's the difference. Some of the things like what's the franchise fee, you really can't bid that in the alternative. I think we're now at the point where what we're trying to do is to gather info so that we can help you all make the right decision. Where do we go from here? What are the comparison points between staying private or staying municipal and going private? The issue that I now see is if the landfill is going to close in October, or possibly sooner, what Adam told me is you're looking at a minimum 6 months lead time from the time you award the contract to the time they start coming into your city and hauling garbage. So we're now sort of up against we're going to be losing money at some point because we don't have a landfill to tip to that's at our same cost. So we need to be thinking, if we're going to do something, whether it's stay in the business and most likely raise rates to pay for it or go private, we need to be thinking about making that decision soon. So I think where Devin and I are right now is to try to use this RFP as both a fact gathering and the potential of an actual franchise agreement. We have set it up such that council could award this franchise agreement based on what we bid out. So we want to get it right. We don't just want it to be necessarily a fact-finding thing and waste our time and effort. Let's get it right on the front end, even if it takes a few weeks longer. And kind of give you all, immediately go into giving you all the breakdown of what that comparison is, what it looks like. And of course, it's not just a money decision. It's our job here, Devin and I and Robert, to help you all understand what the financial and practical considerations are. You all get to wrestle with the political considerations, but it's our intent to get that in front of you all as soon as possible, simply because we feel like we must.
We've done a whole bunch of talking. Todd, Greg, any questions about where we think we are?
Well, and it's funny you should mention it because currently I'm at the landfill in Frankfurt. So, but anyway,
Keep track of your mileage, Todd.
Ironic, isn't it? But anyway, the one of the biggest things I want to see, if we do recycling and that we can add into the, we've just recently purchased more Herbies. So, that's I guess that's an attractive part to the fact that we don't have to worry about those. Is that something that's, the people that we spoke to, does that play into it? The fact that we have all these Herbies throughout Georgetown, are we going to have to
Absolutely
scrap those and they will have to go to new ones?
No, that's a really great observation, Todd. One of the critical things that we talked about was their ability, whoever we go with as our franchisee, their ability to buy our equipment, not just our Herbies, but our trucks as well. And the interesting thing that they talked about is every city does it a little bit differently. There are some places where the cities will actually retain ownership of the Herbies, and they'll just pick it up. I don't think we want to do that, but they're absolutely willing to buy our trucks, our Herbies, and like the mayor said, take our people on.
Right.
But all that takes time, and it's a complicated thing to factor into 3 weeks of bid. So we need to try to be as specific as we can to what we're looking for. And that's one of those decision points that we're talking about having you all weigh in on. Do we have any interest, if we were to privatize, in having some arrangement where, the city did hang on to those carts? Or some cities, I do not recommend this, some cities allow people to go buy their own containers.
Right.
And the issue there is you can't pick it up with the one-armed truck. But
Right.
some cities insist upon it.
That's not.
These are decisions that we can't make, Devin and I can't make for you. So we're telling you that those are factors to consider. And there's a whole list of them. We're hopeful to, like I said, bid most of them that we can in the alternative. Like Devin said, you can bid mandatory recycling and subscription recycling in the alternative. Give us the price for both. Give us the price for if recycling is once a week, and give us the price if recycling is every other week. Those are things that we think we can probably handle and give you all, feedback on. We'll get direct feedback. I hope that answered your question, Todd. I hope I didn't hijack your.
Oh,
Your
you
thought
did,
there.
and that's fine. Yeah, that's definitely right. Are we looking at whichever company or whatever company we get, say XYZ company? Are we looking at potentially just turning billing and everything over to them, or is it something that we continue to look at to collect through GMWSS?
You sure you weren't on this call with me?
He's reading your mind.
They brought the same thing up, Todd. They said, well, would you continue to collect through your water company, or would you have us do the billing? And their statement was that will directly affect the price.
Mhm.
Okay.
I don't have the answer to that question.
It might be something that we include as an alternate as well. I mean, this price sheet is getting pretty long, but I think it's worthwhile to understand how, that administrative burden would impact costs. And if it's not by a lot, maybe we don't elect with that option, but I think it's an option to provide that alternate.
Yeah, I think Chase is going to need that information to even evaluate the water company's perspective on it.
Yep.
So I think any of these things bid in the alternative will give us more data to work from.
Those are all things that are going to drive the cost one way or the other, but we have to be the ones to consider. The water company has to be the ones to consider what is the administrative burden, or what's the political burden of continuing to do that. If someone else is responsible for picking up the garbage, but we're responsible for making sure that people pay, is that a workable relationship?
Right. Greg, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I've got somebody out here mowing behind me. If you hear that, I apologize for that. No, I think my questions have been answered. I just, the top two ones were on the bids, just multiple bid options for the recycling and no recycling, and also for the billing. And Andrew, you're answering my other question about possibility of selling the equipment to whoever the bid is awarded to. So those are my my two biggest questions going into it. I hadn't heard from Robert what his thoughts were. I don't want to put him on the spot, but just to get a word from him.
Well, like I've told everybody that's involved here, I think now is the time to look at it, because like Andrew said, everything was going on. But I just want to make sure that, we look at everything, because there are a lot of stuff that we do that private companies do not do. And picking up couches, toilets, lots of stuff. We just got to make sure we cover everything.
Yeah.
And then there's one question I got that we haven't talked about is, are we just looking at residential, or are you going to include commercial?
Another great point, Robert.
Because right now, any commercial is wide open. But if you were to offer commercial and residential for Georgetown, which you can do, you could drive your residential rates down some too.
Yeah. I think
that's up to the council.
It unfortunately isn't just a political issue with commercial garbage. we are now unfortunately in a situation where the law, which has changed in the last 3 years, says if we want to make a change to our garbage collection scheme, our franchise, if it affects more than 50 customers, essentially, we have to go through an 18-month rigorous, difficult process in order to do it.
Hmm.
We
Well,
couldn't-
Andrew, I don't know. I need to pull the statute. Portions of that statute only apply to residential.
Okay, well, that's
So-
good.
But I do think you're right that we're going to need to, like you said, it's been amended in the last 3 or 4 years, and it's very onerous. And if that applies on the commercial end, it doesn't mean we couldn't do it. It means we couldn't do it right now. So, but that's a great point, Robert. I think until now we've been contemplating it only as residential, but it's something to consider.
It's something
Rob-
we absolutely be willing to look at as long as it didn't tie us up
Yeah.
from fixing what we need to fix right away.
You know, Robert brought up another good point too, was with the couches and the mattresses people set out. Have we thought about that on the other
Yes.
side as far as bidding that? And,
They actually brought that up on their own. Because what happens is these franchise bids end up looking more like a negotiation on the front end. And they said, you know, whether or not you require us, whether the city requires them to do things like pick up couches, or our very favorite topic, with pick up things outside the can, it's going to affect the price. But here was what I heard that surprised me. It's pretty typical for them to offer something like, we'll pick up 2 cans once a week, and once a month a large item set out, and it not substantially affect the price. The thing is, if we want it, we got to state it. We got to state that up front, because it affects the price. But it didn't sound, from speaking to one company, and I tend to speak to the other, that's the major player in the area, it didn't sound like it was a deal killer, or suddenly the price was going to skyrocket. I think that the key is in how tightly we require it. And, you know, to the extent we do now, when we can offer people additional cans and they don't necessarily have to set stuff outside the can, we can mitigate issues like that. But he was very clear in saying, these are things you've got to think about in terms of how, not only what it's going to cost, but how likely they are to bid on it.
what do you see any other municipalities as far as the haul away of additional items, or do they charge the residential customers for those, or is that something that an option?
It is. You know, most companies, from my understanding, they will have some kind of a sort of I don't know what I want to call a provision, but they're willing to either have vouchers. We're going to give you 1 or 2 or 4 items a year that we're willing to pick up outside the can, no charge at all. And after that, we're going to start charging you. Or if you consistently leave stuff out of the can, we're going to start finding you, essentially. But I think it's pretty typical to see a company have some leniency, because everybody has, you know, toilets from a renovation or an old couch, and they're willing to provide that as part of a, you know, a limited basis special pickup, or 1 day of every month that anybody can set something out, and they're gonna provide extra fleet power that day and come through and pick it up only on that day. But if it's other than that day, then you're going to pay for it. that there's any number of ways to do that. I think that the other jurisdictions who have been either doing this for a long time or doing it themselves know that they've got to think of that ahead of time. We certainly have that problem. Robert could regale you with horror stories for days.
Well, and Andrew, well, Greg, to that point, it's funny, before we kind of took this turn, we were actually having conversations about what to do on that issue, because we have issues all the time. Some of Robert's people will be out and something will be sitting by the road, by the trash can, presumably trash, and they'll pick it up, and then we'll get a phone call, you threw my kid's toy away, it's valued at this many dollars, what are you gonna do about it? And so we were talking about what kind of policy and public information we could put out there to prevent that in the future, because that was a huge issue. But like Andrew said, most jurisdictions that I know of, they might have, a couple free pickup days, but an additional set out is supposed to be, it's supposed to have a charge, and it makes sense because they're providing us this price based on their assumptions. So if that assumption is one big pickup day a month, that's going to be included in that monthly rate. I mean, that's going to impact that price. But I think that comes into the billing issue too, because if we're handling billing and we've got somebody who calls in and says, hey, I already used my free pickup, but I need another one, so then GMWSS is handling that request, and they have to communicate that to the vendor. And those are just considerations that we've really got to marinate in. But that's one of the biggest portions that we're still wrestling with, is how do we approach additional pickups. And Andrew, while we were talking, I pulled that statute. Only the exception applies to 50 residential customers. So it appears that commercial customers are subject, or commercial pickup of solid waste is subject to that statute. So I think we're pretty limited to residential here.
Yeah.
Well, let me ask this question, and Robert, you chime in on this as well, is what if, and just throwing the what if out there, what if we kept the grabber truck and still ran it around on certain days as we have been? How would that play in?
Well, we would have to keep the grabber truck because I'm assuming we're going to keep brush. I don't think Rumpke would want to do, or whoever.
Right.
Would want to do the brush, because the brush is a whole nother nightmare. Yeah, we could do that, but you're still going to have to pay a tipping fee unless you work it out up front. And if you work it out up front, that affects the rate also. Because we usually take, I run 2 of the gripper trucks a day, and they are busy most days. Usually they'll do couches and stuff like that in the morning and go to the landfill, and then they do the brush in the afternoon where you don't have to take it to the landfill. So yeah, that's a possibility, but you'd have to pay the tipping fee. We also got the street sweeping that we're going to have to pay the tipping fee to get rid of. So
yeah, Robert, I had assumed that it'd be awful hard for you to get out of the grabber truck business. You just get too many calls for it, and there's an expectation of service that I don't see you getting out of that business.
no, well, unless they picked up the stuff that was deemed needing to go to landfill.
Yeah.
Brush and stuff, I figured we would keep that.
You're going to also have things like special events where we put extra cans on the ground.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We've got a provision in there where they would agree to give us a certain number of receptacles for certain events, but it's never going to cover everything. I want to add that I think what happens in a lot of communities, or what certainly can happen, is that's one of the major drivers for having that franchise fee tacked on to a private franchise. You know, if you have a 5% franchise fee, it gets passed right through to the customers, yes. But what you're doing is you're funding wear and tear on your roads, but you're also funding the sanitation efforts, the environmental cleanup efforts that you can't get a private company to do, like street sweeping, like special event pickup, like, you know, litter abatement, things like that. And it gives you a funding source that's small, but meaningful in terms of keeping that effort up.
And would we be looking at the property that the recycling center is on now? Would we be looking at keeping that, or would that be something we would possibly look at getting rid of? Have we thought that far ahead?
We haven't thought that far ahead, but
Okay.
anything's game, right?
Absolutely. So,
I think Todd went on mute.
oh yeah, I'm driving and and I'm hitting rumble strips, so I don't want to freak you all out with that. And on the recycling, is it, and to answer your question from earlier, no, Andrew, I wasn't on the call with you, but anyway, is the recycling going to be something that, because the one thing I don't want to see is, you know, whatever company makes money on one end, then turn around and they're making money off, you know, trying to make double their money. And, you know, I want to try to keep it as cost effective as possible, as you all do, you know, just trying, what would be the better way, mandatory or voluntary?
Yeah, and again, what we've seen from the data is, you know, some communities are really adamant that they don't want to force people into recycling. And so they say, well, we want a subscription recycling service. And what you typically see is the provider says, that's fine, but it's going to cost you more overall to have that. You know, for the people who want just trash, it might actually be a little bit less. But for the people who want trash and recycling, they're going to pay more than they would if everybody got trash and everybody got recycling. So it from a financial perspective, to me, it's a no-brainer. If that rule holds true across the board, what makes sense is mandatory recycling. It becomes a policy question of whether you want to have all your citizens be required to do recycling. You can make the argument that you're serving multiple great public purposes with it, but that doesn't always carry the day.
Right.
Yeah, Andrew's right. It's financially, there's no question. It's an exclusive franchise, but, or I mean, not an exclusive franchise, but it's to get the numbers we want and the best bid, you make it mandatory, but that is purely a public policy question. And that's one.
If they don't want to participate, they don't have to participate.
Some people would rather have to pay a little more and get to make that decision. And that's where the council will make that decision.
Okay.
That's when
where that decision should be made.
That's when we're absolutely comfortable that we can give you the choice after you know what the costs are. We don't have to make that decision beforehand.
Yeah, that way you can make the most informed choice rather than guessing if it's a politically correct thing to do. You'll have real numbers to base your decision on. Robert, if we do this, it would be a big change.
Yes. Very big change.
But you've had time to think about this possibility for a long time. Do you think we can successfully run just a public works department? You've always relied on that staff that could shift back and forth between the functions, and it
Well-
made your garage work.
Most time it goes when I got to shift somebody, it's to sanitation
Okay.
because that has to be done first.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, unless there's snow on the ground or something, but you know, you gotta, most of the time, as far as shifting people, you shift from public works to sanitation. Not very much the other way around.
Okay. So, to the council members, are y'all comfortable with this type of RFP going out? Because it is different than what we had discussed with you just 2 months ago.
Yeah, I think from my standpoint, Devin, are you going to send them to us before you actually send them out and let us look over them?
Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I'm good to go.
Okay.
Yeah, I think so. I like the ideas that's being discussed, and I know that'll give, if it does go through, that'll give Robert, not have to worry about shifting people back and forth. He'll able to do a lot of the things that sometimes gets, well, like I don't have people here today for and shifting stuff. So, yeah, I'm good with it moving forward.
Okay. Devin,
And-
you feel like you got everything you needed?
Too, yeah, I think we've got a couple edits to make based on some of the alternates we're adding, but as soon as we get that in its final format, we're going to send that to potential vendors, and we'll send it to you all as well.
Okay.
Great. Well, we got everybody here, Andrew. Anything else we can do? I mean, I know it's a committee meeting and it's a called meeting and we have an
Yeah.
agenda, so we can only stay on that script, but within
Yeah.
that.
I think that essentially covers what we wanted to cover, but I mean, I want to reiterate the idea that I keep using the word crossroads. I'm just going to say it until people get tired of me saying it, but that's kind of where we are with sanitation. Change is coming, and we're navigating that change. It's unfortunate that we're having to navigate it in the process of also passing a budget. We are acknowledging that we're going to pass this budget and we're going to have to come right back no matter what we do and do something else. But knowing that we're at that crossroads, that's why we took the garbage trucks that we know we need out. There's no sense in buying those trucks now if we're not going to stay in the business. But the fact remains, Robert needs people and he needs equipment, and we're in a crisis. But we have to give you all the facts to make the right decisions. I think we're asking for forgiveness that we're going to be kind of bringing this to you at light speed for all kinds of reasons. We want to get it right, but we can't let it take forever to get to a decision point.
If you get us good information, when do we get the good information? The council has shown that they'll make decisions.
Good.
Hey, I do have one more question for Andrew. I don't know if it was discussed.
Go ahead.
Okay. I was just thinking, sitting here when we're talking about like Festival of the Horse, we do cleanup and downtown trash, pickups. Would we be able to keep maybe one of the rear loaders for that? Or would we have to sell all of our equipment?
Oh, I can't see why we would have to. Go ahead, Devin.
I think you were going to say the same thing I was.
I think what we're asking in the RFP is not give us a price for our trucks. 'Cause I don't think that's reasonable.
Right.
It's give us your plan for purchasing our trucks and keeping our people.
Right, especially with the trucks. I mean, we don't have the legal authority to just sell them. We're going to have to surplus them. So what we're asking is explain to us your willingness to participate in that public auction process to obtain our trucks. But the question about the Festival of the Horse, we actually, Robert, included a provision that required the franchisee to provide free of charge extra pickup for the Festival of the Horse, and I think there might have been one more event. So we actually called that event out in the RFP.
Yeah, but I mean, okay, well, but how are they going to do it? Would be my question. I'm sure.
Provide a
thinking-
dumpster and then come get it.
Provide a dumpster. Okay. Well, I was just thinking, we would have to have some place to put stuff.
Right.
You are right.
So, and it may be better for us surplusing the trucks through public surplus than what they would be willing to, buy them for.
It might.
Yep. But Robert, I think this is going to have enough flexibility built in that if you look at what your needs are, and if you feel like you need to keep a garbage truck, we'll probably keep one for you.
Well, I just thought, it was mentioned that they would buy the equipment. It may be nice to have in emergency situation stuff.
Sure.
I don't see, I kind of agree with Robert that having one in a rare emergency, and I shouldn't say rare, in emergency situations, it's, you would use it. You could use it with, some of the brush pickup.
Yes, you could.
And as well as, I know that, we have the leaf truck, but you could also use it with those too. So I mean, just thinking kind of outside the box with that. I think wouldn't want to get rid of everything, but keep some stuff. So.
Yep, I agree.
Sounds good. Well, if you guys would do a little more work and incorporate everything we've heard today, then we can move this process forward. Well, this is the epitome of government hurry up and wait. We've been with all of the legal actions that the county's taken and all the gyrations with the landfill and us involved in the lawsuit and dismissed from the lawsuit and now it really is upon us. So, well, thank you all for your time, and we'll get back with you as soon as we have more information.
Absolutely. Thanks for taking time this afternoon to give us the big picture.
Yep.
All right.
Really appreciate it.